it not yet a very little while, and Lebanon shall be turned into a fruitful field, and the fruitful field shall be esteemed as a forest. And in that day shall the deaf hear the words of the book, and the eyes of the blind shall see out of obscurity and out of darkness. The meek also shall increase their joy in the Lord, and the poor among men shall rejoice in the Holy One of Israel. For the awesome one is ceased, the boaster is consumed. All they watch in vain are cut off. They make a man sin for a word, and lay a snare for him that rebuketh in the gates that turn aside.
Good morning, welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. I'm continuing in the book of Isaiah, chapter 29. There we go. All right. Whoa, hold on. For some reason my microphone's all jacked up there. That's better. A nice hot signal there. Okay. I think that's where it's supposed to be. I don't want it to be too quiet. All right. Here we go. So I believe we were on verse 20, or at least we had touched on the concept, of course, from the previous two verses, which I'll read right now because I wasn't exactly sure, and I'm not going to go back and peruse the video file. I just didn't have time. In that day shall the deaf hear the words of the book, and the eyes of the blind shall see out of obscurity and out of darkness. I think I should have started this at 18. Because I know I talked significantly about 17, and I want to talk about 18 a bit, and 19. Well, especially 19. Or whatever. The eyes of the blind shall see out of obscurity, out of darkness. The meek also shall increase their joy in the Lord, and the poor among men shall rejoice in the Holy One of Israel. So along with, as it talked about things changing, the fruitful field becoming as a forest, Lebanon, which would be the forest, being turned into a fruitful field. Uncultivated, wild, turned into cultivated and tamed. Symbolic of peace. Because only in peace does man have the security to plant crops for the future and cultivate land. What's the point of cultivating land if it's not safe? People will just come and take what you've made and steal it. So when there's no law, no safety, no peace, everything tends to get wild. Everything tends to fall apart. The structures of civilization throughout war. I mean, look at what war is a destructive thing. People always want to say. I get frustrated sometimes. I'll hear people talk about foreign policy, like famous mouthpieces and all that, and they'll talk about like the wars, how we. Everything. Oh, when we go places, they get better. It's like after people are dead, it's questionable whether it's better to be wealthy and dead, or alive and still. I'd rather leave that question up to others. If I was living in an oppressive country, the last thing I'd want to do is get bombed. I don't know. I've nothing. Defensive fighting is. I do not have a problem with it, but we haven't been doing that for a long time. Anyway, so even a marvelous work and a wonder, the wisdom of the wise men shall perish. Oh, we already did that all. Okay. The idea of hearing the words of the book, see out of obscurity. And we talk about the blindness that comes about to people, right? We've talked about that in Isaiah. Drunkenness is one analogy. They become in a stupor. It's similar to being blind because you don't have your normal sensibilities about you. A stupor, someone who's in a stupor, the closest I've ever been into a stupor was when, but I felt, I mean, other than being drunk, obviously, but outside of alcohol use, I remember using the hydrocodone. That stuff, after I had my nose operation, I took that for a few days, and boy, it made me feel stupid. And I don't know, I remember just feeling like, like everything was just cloudy. There's that, but then there's also actual blindness in the spirit, which is, nothing compared to in the flesh. Because the fleshly blind, well, it's to be compared, obviously, but when you cannot see, there's a whole element of reality that's shut off from you. The visual or the auditory, and it's. And I remember someone was giving their testimony. I forget their name. It was David Wood. And he was talking about how he used to be an atheist. And when he opened up his mind to the existence of God, or something along those lines, I forgot exactly what that moment was described as. But he said it was like coming out of a world, like he was in a subway and he was literally in the video, and he comes out and it was like discovering the whole world exists and not just this limited space that they'd carved out. And without the knowledge of God, we are like that. We are not seeing the entirety of reality. In our life, and I have to start the airplanes first thing. And in the entirety of their life, I don't know if I was saying there. I lost track of my hold on a second. Anyways, so without the knowledge of God, our lives are somehow we're living our life differently. Like I said, and one of the effects is for some people it means that everything is possible for them. They'll do anything. Or it means on some level. Like if you don't get caught, if you can get away with it, if other people don't interfere with you because of it, it opens up many possibilities to in a different direction, in a dark direction. Those possibilities exist for everyone. And many people, even who don't believe in God, will have a moral sense that no, right? But the thing is, and you can't use declarations of faith as a measure. You understand? Like, you can't say, well, he says he's a Christian. You have no idea. When someone says that could be, you understand, the very type of wicked person I'm talking about, that they would easily just say that. Some of the most famous preachers who are wicked are doubtlessly atheists in reality, like in their heart of hearts. They fear not God. Not at all. Not even a little. Not even a tiny little bit. They don't even fear exposure because they'll just lie their way straight through it. They're a man of God. They will just, how dare you question me, a man of God? I mean, maybe not say it so boldly, but, it can be very profitable. There's some very cynical, evil people out there. We should have our eyes open to that. We don't want. Jesus talked about, he that hath ears to hear, let him hear. He had eyes to see, let him see. And the idea is that if the eyes of our spiritual understanding are opened, we can hear from God better and more. Because when the eyes of your spiritual, when you've closed yourself off in that sense, or if you just are closed, because in a sense, the blindness that happens to people is of God. Because sometimes he hides wisdom from them. I've talked about this from 1 Corinthians chapter 2. We speak the wisdom of God, which he hath hidden in a mystery. It's a kind of hidden wisdom which none of the princes of this world knew, for had they known it, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. That if they'd been informed of the truth of what they were actually doing, that they would have decided for their own good to maybe not do that. But God causes blindness to happen so that people will do things that it's not that he's controlling them. You know? It's like, oh, I wouldn't have beat you mercilessly if I knew you were the king's son. That kind of thing. It's like, because they would beat you mercilessly if you were not the son of, if he was, you know what I mean? Like, if they knew he was the son of God, they would not have beaten him so mercilessly. You know what I mean? They would not have done the things they did unto him. But thinking he is not the son of God, they would gladly do it to any man. And you see why God blinds those sons of buckets? You see why he blinds them? Because they don't deserve to see. You get it? They don't deserve to see, and so God puts hooks in their jaws, so to speak. That's the kind of visual thing either, to lead them to destruction. He knows them. God doesn't need any kind of justification for man to blind them. Nah, I won't let you see what you're doing to yourself. I'll let you destroy it because you are wicked. And you'll do that wicked thing. I know. And I'm going to let you do it. So I can damn you forever. And you'll be gone. That's what he does to the wicked. He gives them blindness. But also, sometimes we are blind and he opens our eyes. So you can't judge someone by the blindness of their eyes as to whether God has called them, because we can be blind for a time and our eyes are open. You know, like the song Amazing Grace, you know. Once I was blind, but now I see. And here it has that hopeful aspect that the eyes of the blind will see out of obscurity when God establishes his kingdom, when he restores the fortunes of Israel. That will be, it will open people's eyes to what they were missing. So it is a dual thing. On some level, also, blindness happens and it removes some culpability at times. I don't know exactly how that works. I mean, sometimes ignorance is not always a defense, but it can be, depending on the nature of things. You know, they say ignorance of the law is no excuse. Maybe I can whip up an example. If one strikes me off the top of my head, maybe, but because, and the reason I say that, well, I know scripturally, it said, if you were blind, then you had not sinned. That's what Jesus said to them. At least in that context of, they said, are we blind also? If you were blind, you had not sinned. But since you say you see, your sin remains. There's some level of innocence that we can have. But, I mean, but there's also something working against it where we our own self-inflated view. You know, if I think, I'm the great teacher, I know what the Word of God says, and I'm going to fill your heads with what I say it is. If I don't recognize that there is some blindness in me, that I have blind spots, or that I may, you know what I mean? Like, that's good to think about, to consider, It was good for them to think, am I blind? Like, that was not, Jesus didn't chastise them at all. He just said, if you were blind, then you had not sinned. But since you say you see, you know, it's not a particularly sharp rebuke, but it's saying something. And that those who are in, positions of leadership or, spiritually, teachers, they have a responsibility to ensure that they also inspect themselves and not just become regurgitators of tradition, regurgitators of doctrines that they inherited from others. I do think it's important that we reflect on all that we have received as students, because we all receive it from someone else. There's not a single thing, other than divine revelation spoken to you. All the things you hear about God, it's filtered through the apostles, the prophets, and then teachers. And so it bears mentioning that teachers should and need to not just teach what they've been taught. They need to examine what they've been taught critically. And on some level, I mean, do the people need to have that critical? Well, it should be available to people. That's why I do the study, because it's available. It's not for everybody. But those who wish to question those things, there you go. It's an example of doing that. And I make no pretensions about the entertainment value of this. At times, it can be tedious. I regret it sometimes. I look back at the studies. I'm like, I hope people can get to chapter 29 that I felt really enthusiastic. There were certain chapters where I felt like, did I mail it in? I don't think so. I mean, there were times when I was really tired. I don't know. And I do believe in going back and looking at my own teaching when I have the time. I used to listen to my own studies and edit them extensively. And that caused me to think a lot about what I said. There are numerous things I would probably retread that I say on a live stream, Just that bears. I feel like this should be like, I should make a video about that. Just explanation here, okay? Use caution. You should always use caution when studying, with anyone and by yourself. The meek shall increase their joy in the Lord. Because the meek. Yeah, I definitely need to start on 18 because I didn't feel like we discussed that out. The blindness, the deafness will be cured of men. The remnant who remain will, like I talk about in the millennium, there being a remnant alive after the the return of Christ and the battle of Armageddon and all that. Not everyone in the world is dead. Not everyone in the world is a believer. There are a lot of people left over who are they're just people. And they will inherit, a lot of them will be the meek. I'm sure a lot of the plagues are pointed at the right people. There's going to be a lot of people dying in the world, but the plagues are going to be pointed at the people who need to die most. And there will be leftovers. And their blindness will be cured. They'll see. They won't have any choice. They will see the Son of God. Every knee shall bow to Christ. There got to be knees around two bows. You know what I mean? Like, every knee shall bow. There will be people alive. Because I don't think that's the moment where everything just turns into the end. For some people, like millennialists specifically, they don't believe in that period of time, and that's all right. Because if it turns out, we're not going to do that, I'll be fine with that. The main thing is we have to get our doctrine really straight up to the point of Christ's return. And what we say about what happens after that could be considered somewhat speculative. It's certainly something that is talked about a lot, but the specifics and time and stuff like that, it is, I think, for me, the millennium has always been a pretty straightforward issue, but I try not to be too dogmatic about it, just because I don't want to turn people off over that one issue, because I don't consider it like a matter of, if someone doesn't get it, or they don't, they've been an amillennialist all their life, and that's their thought process. We can talk about it. It doesn't have to be a heated argument. I just don't see why that would have to be, something that we would get all excited about. I get excited about it, and I think that the right view is there is some sort of 1,000-year kingdom. So, especially the way it talks about the rest of the dead live not again till the 1,000 years were finished. There's something about that fact. In that verse itself, since I was a child, that verse in Revelation 20, the rest of the dead live not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. I remember as a teenager, I said child, but good enough, right? Teenager, 15 or 16. I remember reading the book of Revelation and coming across that. And because I was trying to understand what happens when you die. And I had read some of what Jesus said, and also that and the judgment. And I was confused about, because it was just very confusing, because like, well, we die and we go to heaven. That's what we all believed. Everyone just believes you die and you instantly you are a disembodied spirit then, and you just kind of look around and you go to heaven or something, That's what I thought. And I couldn't reconcile it with a lot of scriptures. But that one in particular stuck out of my mind as interesting. It's like that was like, it was like, all the stuff about the resurrection I thought was really hard to reconcile with what I thought about what happens when you die, because I'm like, what's with the resurrection? It's like, why is that? And everyone believes you can just be a person without a body. Why resurrect the body? I mean, and then I came to realize, oh no, the resurrection is a real thing, and it's not just a real thing; it is the thing we need the resurrection. It's strange to me that people think they're going to heaven without the resurrection. They just go. Well, just go? No. You're going to float off to... No. It doesn't work like that. That's another one that people believe. If you don't have to be... I don't want to annoy people with it. You know what I mean? And it's not the subject here. Except that we talk about the millennium and how we would get there. What kind of people will be in the world. Well, for one, the meekness is often confused for weakness, because they're not the same thing. Meekness is not weakness. I can be a very meek person. In fact, I'm generally considered a pretty meek person. It means someone who is restrained, someone who contains themselves, someone who does not become violent easily, or even with words, become. It can be so, but that's a different level. There'd be verbal meekness, but actually, that probably wouldn't even be the thought of verbal weakness, of being gentle with your words. I think in that terms, because I look for a higher standard. It's good to contain yourself. I'm good at containing myself and not punching people in the face, though I would like to, but but I'm not so good at smashing them over the head with my tongue sometimes when I get angry. It's always when you get angry, There's always some reason. Well, and I'd like to be better than that. I'd like to be meek even with my tongue, because I know my tongue is a weapon. Our tongues are weapons. It's funny, because I remember when I used to correspond with people on email for the Shepherd's Chapel, working against the Shepherd's Chapel, actually. And I used to correspond with people, and I remember at times wanting to say really mean things to people who angered me. They said stuff, and I wanted to say, like, what you just said, or like, it makes me question your intelligence, like that. Like, because that's how I felt. I'm like, this person's not intelligent. But I realized it wasn't the thing to say. It's not an argument. It's a commentary on the other person's abilities to understand. But maybe it's more of a commentary on my ability to explain. It might be a commentary on their stubbornness and not willing to hear it all, or to even really pay attention. Because I know sometimes I can write and speak things that are very opaque. They can be hard to take in for some people. And so maybe I talk and they don't get it. I always presume I'm giving a very detailed explanation that's clear, but, or that's what I'm attempting to do, but it's not always guaranteed. So I got to be considerate in the verbal realm also. It's not always their fault. It could be, but telling them that is, in an argument, I find sometimes people tell me I'm stupid or something like that. And I always think that I used to have comebacks for that. To me, there's no point in coming back to that. That's not an argument. I usually just ignore that, and I'll say that's not an argument, just so you know. I usually like to point people out when people are behaving badly, I just point it out to them. Instead of coming back and giving them the same. I was like, you're being very rude. I'm taking the time to talk to you, and you're talking to me like this. Well, and it comes out in some of the letters later on especially, I think I got much better at being gracious with my words. Yikes. All right. Sorry, this is it's extremely distracting to me to discover I have a splinter that's been there for hours without me noticing. And also I look at it, I'm like, oh, it's got to go. Because I got to think about that. I don't like foreign objects embedded in my skin. It bugs me. Probably because I had a splinter in my hand for 2 years, and that thing used to bug me for, 2 years. All right, so the poor among men, notice the poor among men, because the poor among men are rich with God. It's a concept that's taught in the New Testament, and it's implied here also. The poor among men, they're going to be rejoicing in the Holy One of Israel. And if that means wealth, that means blessing. Those who rejoice in the Lord and make the Lord their joy are the blessed. Because if you're rejoicing in God, that means God's good to you, and God's going to be pleased with you because you're rejoicing in the goodness of Him and that He's given you. They have reason to rejoice. And then take that reason and then do it. It's good to, God doesn't need worship and praise, but we ought to do it because it's right and it's good for us. When we praise God for His goodness and remind ourselves of that, it's good not only it's not like it just pleases God, like, oh, I like getting praised. No, but it also means we are thankful. It also means we appreciate what we've been given, to joy in the Lord. Those who use restraint, those who have endured all the evil of this time, they will have joy. Because sometimes you think it's like, hey, we live out our lives in the world over time, and it can be tough. You endure things for the Lord's sake. So, there are some things, like I've ordered my entire life around God, and around what He taught me to do with my life. You know what I mean? If I disbelieved in God completely, I would probably live a different life. I don't know, because I can't go back and relive it that way. But I'm certain it just would have turned out differently. Just because from the way I went about finding a wife was entirely, driven by my faith. And that was a huge impact early in my life, because I was married by 20. Well, I was engaged by the time I was 20 years old. And by the time I was 21, I was married. The terrible one is brought to naught, the scorner is consumed, and all that watch for iniquity are cut off. Because at the end of the world, when Jesus comes, He will take, I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pits, and a great chain in his hand. And he laid all on the dragon, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, that he should deceive the nations no more. In Isaiah's time, obviously, the Babylonians pass away, the Assyrians pass away, but God's people endure. God returns them from their captivity, the ones whom He has mercy on. The nation is rebuilt and restored. But the wicked are cut off. The scorners are consumed. Those who looked at the prophet and scorned the word of God. There's a lot of track record of those who, when God gives the warning, take heed. Sin matters. It matters. The sins we commit matter. It is not just simply, a game. The Lord is going to bring the wicked to an end. The wicked one, in particular, and this terrible, It's like the word awesome. It's like awe-striking, awe-inspiring. You know, the one whom they feared. The one, you know, the terrible one. Let me see. Let's look at this word real quick, because I kind of want to. Okay. The terrible one. Yeah. Aritz. And here's the definition. And it said literally, like when my little pop-up window, if you were following along. Awe-inspiring, terror-striking is what it says. Awe-inspiring, you know. From the hand of tyrants, the mighty. Look at the uses on the right, see? Tyrants, oppressors, great power, interesting. Used quite a bit. Isaiah 29, 25. The blast of the terrible ones is as a storm. Terrible nations. It's funny, when we were in Isaiah 25, we didn't really look closely at this word. It's funny, it's been in Isaiah now since chapter 13, and I never looked it up once. Not that that's critical, because it kind of, we're not talking about there's some like astounding difference in meaning here. Fearful, that is powerful or tyrannical, mighty oppressor. That's Strong's definition. And over here, awe-inspiring, terror-striking. I was going to say, I think it may be used of the Lord, but let's see. Is it ever used of the Lord? Because it's not, because he is awe-inspiring, terror-striking. But, men fear men. It doesn't look like this is ever used of the Lord. Terrible the nations, no. It doesn't appear to me. And anytime I was thinking maybe in the law, but no, definitely not. Go back. All right. So the terrible one is brought to naught. And there's always some terrible one. There's Hitler was a terrible one, right? And they brought him to nothing. All the kings of the earth. Remember it was in Isaiah 14. It was all the kings of the nations, all of them lie in glory, each one in his own house, and they wait to receive him down. Are you become like us? Are you brought low? They're all brought low. All the kings of the nations are brought down. All their power is come to naught. When the scorner is consumed, all that watch for iniquity are cut off. All that wait in vain is the way I translated that when I was writing that song back 25 years ago or whatever. Oh boy, it was a while ago. Only 22 years ago, I think. 23 or 24. Because the album came out in 98, and I've been in the process of writing it for at least a year, I think. Let's see. All right. The scorner is consumed. Scornful one. Those who scorn. Like I said, there is a scornfulness. Like, God isn't coming back. You believe in that Jesus garbage? All that watch for iniquity. I forgot what I was doing. There we go. Watch for iniquity. So I do want to go back here real quick and just check this out. All that watch for iniquity. I don't really want to look up the words because I did that before. I know what they mean. Watch also has the power of to wait. It also, the idea of keep watch. You know what I mean? And so, and then the word, where is it? All the watch, oh, there we go. All that watch, let's see what this says here. Yeah, just to watch or be awake. For iniquity, it's aven, which can mean like sometimes empty, but it can also mean wicked. It's a weird word depending on the context. I'll show you. I didn't really want. Let's see. What I really want to do though is look at let's just see what the NIV says. Let's see what the thought for thought translation says. I'm just curious if they have a similar thing as the King James, or are they going more in the direction I did when I did this song. Ruthless will vanish, the mockers will disappear, and all who have an eye for evil will be cut down. Interesting. That's definitely going for a thought there. Have an eye for evil. But I like it, actually. Maybe that's the idea. Maybe that's an idiom. I mean, maybe that idiom of ours is the best way to translate their idea of keeping watch for evil, for Aven. Remember, when the house of God, Bethel, when they set up the golden calf at Bethel, because they set up one at Bethel, and I believe that's right, yeah, that one at Bethel became known as Beth Aven. The house of God turned into the house of Aven, trouble, sorrow, wickedness. But yeah, I remember reading this definition when I was going to say as a kid, but as a 20-year-old, which to me is a kid. Sorry, from the unused. When I was 20, I thought I was pretty mature. Now I look at anyone under 30, I think of as a child still. Not a child, but a kid. All right, you're not a child, you're a kid. You're an adult kid. Not all, of course, but I mean, as you get older, you'll see. You just feel that way. Just because though you may have done a lot of things, you may be a very responsible person, you just haven't lived enough life yet. You're still a child experiencing adult life for the first time. You know what I mean? Like when you go out in the adult world at 18, you're just a beginner at it. You know what I mean? Because you've been a child the whole time, it's totally different. It's totally different to be controller of your own life and then to do that for some time. You know what I mean? You may be way into it at 25 and great, excellent. There's, obviously, it's not a slam against anybody's capabilities, I understand. It's just, you just can't help it. You're still growing up. And I'm still growing up at 47, but it's not like a child thing. It's like, I need to become, I don't want to grow up into an old fool. And this is I remember this Strong's definition, from an unused root, perhaps meaning properly to pant. Hence to exert oneself, usually in vain, to come to naught. Strictly nothingness. As I said, strictly the word means, it means strictly nothingness, also trouble, vanity, wickedness, specifically an idol, because that's Beth Aven. When it says specifically an idol, it means in a very specific context, it means an idol. So it's translated in various different ways, right? But that definition was what I dealt with when I was younger. That's why I translated it the way I did. I do prefer it just in the sense of evil in this context. Those who watch for evil, in a sense of that's what they keep watch for in a negative way. They enjoy it. I mean, I know there are people who enjoy evil. I mean, we know this. But I mean, in small and great ways. I was going to start small and say, they like gossip. They like to know what's going wrong with people's lives. They like all the juicy tidbits of people's troubles. And then something bad happens, and it's like an excitement to them. It's a thrill. But also, there's, of course, just this plain old, there's like lust. Someone could be watching for opportunities. They could just be walking around looking for opportunities to lust. Looking for, can I see something? I do like to have an eye for evil. It's like, there's my opportunity. Jump to do the evil. I'm always watching out for a chance. You know what I mean? Like I'm always looking out for what evil I can do. That's the thing. And no one ever thinks that, but of course, no one of their sins. Some may know it's evil. They do, but others may not. It's interesting that it's not an evil eye. If thine eye be evil, like Jesus said, the evil eye, because it's definitely, there's no word eye here. Well, I should look at the, I shouldn't discount the NIV so quickly, even though it be the devil's translation, as you all know. That's a joke if you don't know. But I'm not super fond of the NIV, but I do like to look at what, because it's a scholarly translation. I just don't want them to do all my thinking for me. You know what I mean? That's all. It's an interesting read, but I like it as a comparison. I'm like, that's what they thought it should say. A primitive root, to be alert, that is sleepless, hence to be on the lookout. That's strong. And watch, wake. Yeah, I see no, it doesn't have a root that means to an eye. There's no eye involved here except to be alert, on the lookout. So, you might think, what's wrong with watching for evil? I mean, we should look out, be careful, you know. Sometimes I feel like that is a bit of an industry in and of itself. There's a whole, like, some people make a career out of, what are the evil people doing? What are those bad? Let's talk about the people we oppose. You know what I mean? And what they're up to. You know, and there is a certain amount of interest that draws, right? When there are outrageous people in the world. I mean, people love these, like the news magazine shows. I remember, like, when I was, there was, like, a current affair. I don't it was like, bam, and it was like, I'm not sure what was on it, but I'm pretty sure it was some sleazy show. I don't really know it, because, like, I just remember the brand, and then, like, I think it was a news magazine nonsense. I don't remember. But I think that's why, because I didn't watch shows like that, because I know they exist. And it's not necessarily that even. I mean, in Christian circles, some people, I remember, they're just so focused on what the enemy's up to. I don't know if that's bad, but I always found it a bit like I don't know, I you know, it's like, I like to watch out for myself and watch out for the Lord, you know, and like I watch and inspect myself and see what I'm doing first, you know, and others, you'll see enough of others without having to make a sport of it, so to speak, or, you know what I mean, without having to be on the watch all the time. I don't think that's a thing. Like, watch the evil, watch them. Ooh, you see what they're doing? They're so bad. Yeah, I mean, it becomes almost like spectator. I mean, it becomes almost pornographic. You know, there's a certain amount of perversity involved when we constantly, if we find ourselves interested in too much in what the wicked are up to. I mean, we hear what they're up to. Sometimes it's thrown in our face, right? But I don't know. I don't think it's talking about that. And in some way, they need to be watched, as far as they need to be monitored. In that sense, like in a sense that the evil are destructive, and when they propose actually destructive things, like to the nation, they need to be opposed and they need to be spoken against. And ideas that come up that are wrong need to be spoken against. That's all fine. But this is a watching that has to do with desire, right? They watch it. They watch for iniquity because they're watching. Because they are for it. There are people who look for opportunities to evil. They make a man offender for a word, and lay a snare for him that reproveth in the gates, to turn aside the just for a thing of naught. Now, I've always looked at this one particular way, I think, and I'm just curious. I want to bring up the NIV again, because I'm just curious what... I saw something there as I was passing along, and I'm like, I'm curious about that. But then again, I probably should pick up a different modern English translation, because I don't necessarily trust this. Those who with a word make someone out to be guilty. Such a weird way to say it. Who ensnare the defender in court, and with false testimony deprive the innocent of justice. So they take the whole thing as be sort of like false testimony, false accusations, liars. We see false accusations. It's very common for people to, not very common, but it's more common than we probably think. Lying in court, especially when it's to the advantage, you know. A lot of times in family court, husbands and wives, when they get divorced, they lie about each other. Oh, he this, oh, she that, you know. It can become very bitter. So, in our King James, though, I'm going to go to my nose is just about to sneeze. Ow, tingle. Sorry. Here we go. All right, the terrible one. Make a man offender for a word, and lay a snare for him that reproveth in the gate. And lay a snare. And snare him that reproveth in the gate. I wonder what that means. You know what I mean? Like him that reproveth in the gate. They say the defendant in court. This is just all about false testimony. I get because when you then it's sort of easy to make sense of it, but I'm a little bit skeptical. Sorry, NIV, you're just a little too thought for thought, and I just don't trust it. I'll go with the English Standard and see what they have to say. There's a problem with translations. You know, you gotta depend on translators. Everything comes through someone else's hands. Fortunately, you know, the NIV, there were many translators. It's a good translation. It's just a different kind of translation. The Devil's translation. I'm just kidding. Because they took out Lucifer, which is nonsense because Lucifer isn't in the Bible. That's not what it says there. It says Halel ben Shakar, bright star, son of the dawn. It doesn't say Lucifer. That's from the Latin. The King James translators used the Vulgate to help them with the Old Testament, and they translated it Lucifer, which is fine. But that is the whole source. You understand? Without that translated there is no Lucifer. Like, that's the whole idea of Satan's name being Lucifer, Lightbringer, comes from Isaiah 14, the translation of the Vulgate. That's where the whole idea comes, that his name was Lucifer. And so taking it away, you're not taking Satan's name out of the Bible. That's where it came from. Isaiah 14. And we've covered that. I hope I'm not going to go back. I hope you just remember. Let's see. So, by a word make a man to be an offender. Are we on did I get the E? English Standard. Okay, that's good. It's very similar, that part. And then they say, nope, lay a snare for him who reproves in the gate. We don't know what it means either, they said in the English Standard Version. So we're just going to say him who reproves in the gate. And what I think, here's what they did wrong. This is why I don't like the NIV. I don't like it. The defendant in court. I think, well, the gate is the court place, maybe? Could be. Like in a public place where they would do the... But who's the one who reproves in the gate? You know, I just think that's someone... You go to the gate to tell everybody something. Because the gate is where everyone comes in and out. And you're most likely to run into the most people at the gate of the city. Any other place in the city, there's going to be traffic and stuff, but the main thing is at the gate, right? So you go to the gate and you say, hey... Because I think he's talking about himself, the prophet, or any prophet, standing in the gate, reproving people, saying, we need to repent of our sins. You got to stop worshiping idols. It's saying all these things, right? And so they'll accuse him. They'll say, this man is doing, like just this man seduces the people. This man, they accuse him of things. They make him to be an offender, like he's done something wrong for telling the truth. That's what they make a man. And that's the way I always saw this passage, and I still do. I don't like the NIV's version of it. I think They tried to go thought for thought, and they end up destroying the thought, as far as I'm concerned, because it doesn't come through to me that way. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe they're right, but I'm gonna go with the English Standard Version and the King James on that one, because that's too much translation, too much thought going into it. I don't like that. Because if we got it wrong talking about the gate, we still have a great idea there. When you do the thinking for the reader, you remove an element of exploration of ideas. You know what I mean? Like the idea of, what is it to lay a snare for the one who reproves in the gate? You know, they make him an offender. Jesus, they were constantly trying to catch him in his words. You know, they were trying to get him to condemn himself with his words. And turn aside the just for a thing of naught. And then it says, and turn aside is the idea. In the English Standard Version, they say, with an empty plea, turn aside him who is in the right. And they turn aside the right one, the one who's just, the one who's justified. Instead of for a thing of naught, they say with an empty plea. I'll say with a thing of naught. What is the word naught, anyways? I'm curious. Not. Is it ayin? Is it... I think I'm not. I'm just gonna... Tuhu va buhu. Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. The earth became without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. Without form and void. Tuhu va buhu. Tuhu is the formless chaos that was described at the beginning. And also it says God is not... what is it? He created it not in vain. It says in another place, which says Tuhu. He didn't create it Tuhu. I know all those scriptures. So we're not going to get into Genesis right now. But we probably will, actually, because that was another book I was in the middle of teaching before. Thus saith the Lord who redeemed Abraham concerning the house of Jacob. Jacob should not now be ashamed, neither shall his face now wax pale. Oh boy. I might want to turn on my fan, but that's alright. Let's go back here. Alright. So those who watch for iniquity are cut up. No, I'm sorry. Thing of naught. For that formless void. For thing, that naught has no value. Translate in vain, or a vain thing, empty. The state of tohu is chaos, and that's pretty. To me, it's just they turn aside. They don't want justice; they want chaos. They turn aside the right. Someone's up there standing up. Hey, this is all wrong. We shouldn't do this. And they say that guy's got to go to jail because he's not allowed to say that. Like these days, if you're critical of any group based on. I'm not a big. I definitely think. Well, I don't like to pick on people. In particular, since there's liars. That's an abomination, and there are other abominations, right? But we don't say that and I've talked about it plenty, but I'm just not going to bring it up again specifically right now. But like, you start telling people, oh, that's an abomination. And, those who do those things, hell is the place. Hell is the place where traitors, liars, adulterers, and unbelievers dwell. You know, I mean, there's no. I mean, we put the unbelievers there with the sodomites and the. That's what I'm talking about. You can't criticize people based on that, or you can still sort of, but if you do, you might get in trouble, mightn't you? Like if you start talking about as if it was on the same level as race, because it's not on the same level as race, but it is on the same level as things like alcoholism. It is on the same level as things like all other kinds of sin. You know, it's on the level of sins. And it's not, but it's on the level of sin that's not on the level of murder, as far as I'm concerned. Though in the Old Testament, the prescribed penalty was also death. So, because those evils were supposed to be put away from among us, you know. Do I prescribe that? Not at all, because I believe in forgiveness. Like the Old Testament prescribed stoning for adultery, and Jesus said, "He that is without sin, let him cast the first stone," which means we're not doing that. I always think that the problem is human justice is so flawed. You know, that's why I used to support the death penalty. I don't support the death penalty. And that was something that changed. I mean, I support it in theory. I mean, the people who commit those sins should die. And I would like to think we could just get those ones who are really guilty. You know, like if they could have some sort of, I don't know. But it's like, I'm not a fan of it because I read books about how many innocent people, it turns out, were being put to death. So, and also innocent people who are incarcerated. It's like, you know, you can always set someone free if they're still alive and they can try to recover their life. But once you've killed somebody, you can't fix that in any way, shape, or form. They can't be compensated in any way or form for the injustice. So I don't support that because I just think it's not. It's, you know, people get gung ho about it, but they don't consider. You don't consider the horror of you put an innocent man to death. That's on you. You know what I mean? Because they're doing it in the name of the people of your state. We used to do that here, Noah. I remember when they changed it, and at first I was like, what? We get rid of the death penalty? But, you know, but they'll ask for it for you, you know, for speaking the truth, for saying that that's a sin, for saying no, you know, for saying boys are boys and girls are girls. They'll want to make that an offense, you know, because by saying the truth, you reprove their evil works. There's some level at which they will. It's like this guy was saying, he was an atheist. He was like, they're coming for your Bible people. Anyway, because he's not a believer. He's like, I've read that stuff. I know what's in there. They're going to cancel that. That definitely is getting canceled. And so if you don't, and he was trying to encourage people to stand up against this cancel culture crap because, you know, I appreciate it that someone, you know, when you want to be critical of something, know something about it. You know what I mean? Know a little something. You know? If you read the Bible and God doesn't speak to you, all right. You know, if you've read it and it never spoke to you, like if God didn't speak to you through it in some way, shape, or form and make himself manifest to you, not that always happens that way. You know, sometimes you read it and it's like, and you come back later or something like that. There's no end to the stories of people who have been touched by God in some strange way, and, you know, after years of maybe opposing. Like the Apostle Paul is a classic example of someone who was not just a non-Christian, but an anti-Christian. You know, actively fighting against the church, actively seeking their arrest for speaking for saying that Jesus was risen. For declaring the truth. And it says, thus saith the Lord, who redeemed Abraham. You know what? Well, I'm going to change the title of this study to say we started on 18, even though the card will say 20. I mean, we're pretty much done. Let's read the verses, because I think we'll just pick up, because it's not complicated here. Thus saith the Lord who redeemed Abraham concerning the house of Jacob. Abraham being the one who received the promise from God, I will make you father of many nations. That's even what his name means, father of many nations. It had been changed from Abram, which meant something else. And there were several nations that he was father of. The Ishmaelites and the Midianites, and also Israel. Also the Edomites, because Edom was Jacob's brother. Of course, there was Isaac in between, Abraham, Isaac, and then Jacob. So he says, Jacob shall not. Now he's using the name of Jacob. It refers to the people of Israel in terms of their natural descent from the one. He's invoking Abraham and Jacob here because that's for whom God does it. For the sake of his promise to their fathers, he does not utterly forsake Israel. He may chastise the people, cut some of them off, just as he cut off Esau. Israel was cut off. Not the whole nation. There still is Israel. But many of them with whom God was not pleased were cut off and destroyed by the Assyrians, by the Babylonians, by the Romans. And then you go, as your mind goes there, and then you historically go. And you go to last century, and you think whoa, do you say the same thing about that? I don't, because I didn't live, God didn't speak to me and say this was some sort of punishment. Because not everything is a punishment. Job suffered, and it wasn't a punishment. Not everything we suffer is a punishment. Like Jesus said, do you think those on whom the Tower of Siloam fell, do you think they were greater sinners? Or the Galileans whose blood Pilate mingled with their sacrifices? That you think that was bad? You think that maybe because that happened to them, they were bad people God was punishing? No. But I say to you, unless you repent, you will perish just like that. The same thing waits for you. But Jacob should not be ashamed, meaning Jacob could be ashamed and his face waxed pale if his children were all cut off and destroyed. But instead he sees his children, the work of my hands, in the midst of him. They're all together. Him being the whole nation, He sees his children, the work of my hands, in the midst of him. They sanctify my name, sanctify the Holy One of Jacob, and fear the God of Israel. We have feared other things. There was in 26, there was that sort of pleading they made. Other lords have ruled over us, but by thee only will we make mention of your name. We don't call other things God. Because there were children who were faithful, who heeded the prophets. And when this all came to pass, they all were, and the knowledge of God increased among those who were faithful. As he preserves us, as he gives us his word, we prosper. We are his workmanship. We are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus unto good works. The children of God do things. They don't watch for evil. They watch for good. You know what I mean? They are watching out for good. Looking for, what good might I do? What good thing might I do today? Just because it's good to do right and good. I certainly have no hope of reward because I'm bought with a price. I'm God's servant. I'm his slave. I don't own things. This is all the Lord's stuff I got to take care of. I mean, on a certain level, I have to remember, none of it's mine. It's all God's. Because I have nothing. I'm a dead man without the Lord. I'm just a dead man waiting to happen. You know what I mean? Just a dead man waiting to happen. But through God, I have a hope that I shall live again and forever. And so in that, I must serve God. I must do what He would have me do because I'm His servant. The salvation was bought with His blood. You know what I mean? I can't do anything about that. I can't improve on it. I can't do anything to enhance it or bet. But that is not to say, though, that by using our gifts and by doing well, there isn't some kind of reward, because it is implied as such in the New Testament. It is implied that what we do with what we've been given is important, and that there is a reckoning. We are His workmanship, but He wants to see that workmanship working. Because those that do not are rejected. They shall sanctify my name. Sanctify, hold as holy, as separate and special. The name of God. It's not just His name, though, right? The name is fame. Like Michael Jackson. You're going to say the name and you know who I'm talking, the celebrity. Just a famous name on music. Mickey Mouse, whatever. Jesus Christ. He has a name. It's not just the sound of the syllables, but it's what that implies. It's the story. It's the whole person in God. Have you heard the name of God? It's not just, His name is this. That's always the start, What's your name? My name is this. And then from that, you begin to know a person, starting with their name. It's kind of the way it starts. And with God also, we kind of get to know Him by His name. We start with the name, and then we fill in all the blanks underneath as far as what's He all about? Who is this God? Who is this Jesus? By knowing Him, you also make His name more sanctified. You know what I mean? Because there's something more special. Like, to me, there's no more special name in the world than Katie, because that's my wife's name. And it means a whole lot to me. And someone I know a lot, because they're very special. You know what I mean? So it means something to me. Same thing with God. There's a lot, when I say the name of Jesus, there's a lot there that I know, that I've learned, that I've experienced, that I've been through. And by being closer to God, we are more precisely sanctifying Him. Because when I don't know God, it's like the name Katie to everybody else in the world. Katie who? Who is this Katie? Who is this God? Who is this person? We don't know them. Right? They're strangers to us. We have no knowledge. How can I sanctify that which I know not? How can I hold as holy that which I cannot hold? I don't have an idea of what it is to hold in my mind. I have no fixed vision of it or him or her. So I cannot hold as separate and holy God only because I don't know who He is. Now, I don't have to completely know who He is, but I have to have in some way, because here's the thing, you can sanctify the name of God, just sort of do it. Like, I'm going to just hold, God's name is holy. That means I'm not going to use it as a swear. I'm not going to be, Jesus, they do it like that. That's fine, but that's not really, I don't know how that precisely is sanctified. You know what I mean? Meaning, every knee shall bow to Christ. That means, like, at His name, every knee in the world's going to bow. So what does that evoke in me? How do I react to that? That's my sanctification. That's how, that should be, my actions should be increasing the sanctity of His name. Part of that also is, hey, I bear His name. That is also a concern, because the the word of God is evil spoken of because of bad teachers and stuff. You know what I mean? So if I'm doing bad, not only could I be serving ill of those who hear me, but I can be bringing disrepute upon God himself and doing everything except sanctifying his name. In the last verse, they that erred in spirit shall come to understanding, and they that murmured shall learn doctrine. Again, reemphasizing that idea of the millennium as a time where people who were blind now are going to see, because God is going to be in the world. Just like after after the events of the Assyrians and Babylonians, it was eye-opening. It was like, wow, the prophet, it was Isaiah, because he saw this stuff happening. And so then so all his writings come into sharp focus. Because now they say, hey, wait a second. What do we need to know about God? Let's ask Isaiah. He's the one who knew God at the time when it counted. Who knew God's will when it counted. Who spoke those things. Who said, this is wrong, that's wrong. And so bad things are going to come. Then the bad things came. And we knew they were bad because of the way it came. And because of the prophet. And so then that opens our eyes to the things of God. We come to, same thing when Jesus returns. He's going to return. There's going to be a bloodbath. The world's going to change, and it will open eyes. It won't have to be like a miraculous thing. It's just because their eyes will be opened by the events. Sometimes the events are so startling, they open your eyes. So they that erred in spirit, they shall come to understanding, and then the murmured shall learn doctrine. These are erring people. Notice, but they're not watching for evil. They're not scorners. They murmured a bit. Murmuring can be pretty serious. It says, do not murmur, as some of them murmured in the wilderness and were overthrown. In 1 Corinthians 10 it says, because those things were examples for us, right? That we should not follow the same example of unbelief. But this isn't really talking about believers. This is unbelievers. They were murmurers, and they were error in spirit. They didn't know, there's some way in which, as God said another time to the prophet Jonah, in the city there are all these people, and they don't know their right hand from their left. It's an idiom for being kind of not really with it. You don't know your right from your left. That's a significant deficit. They don't even have that. That's like something I teach to 6 and 7 year olds. Usually by then. I remember it didn't come in to play a lot, I think, till I joined football, which was in 4th grade, where I really started focusing. Was that then? Or I forgot when I started really focusing on right and left, like for sure. It had to be before that. I don't know. But it's interesting the way kids struggle with it. Anyways, we all struggle with knowledge of God because God does not give it all to us. He makes us work for it to some degree. The things we go through in the world are not by accident. God wants us to work. It's like he wants the wicked to do what the wicked are going to do. He doesn't want them necessarily to know the information that would stop them, because they're the sort that will do that. And God has not chosen to have mercy on them to open their eyes, maybe to turn them around. Sometimes he does. Often he does not. The Apostle Paul is exceptional. Most of the other Pharisees didn't get that kind of thing. They didn't have Jesus appear to them and strike them down one at a time until they were all his, He didn't do that. But at that time, when he comes, the remnant that survive and that are still in the world will come to understanding. And people with minor sin, that's what it seems to say. Now, it's always been confusing to me because there are certain passages where it feels like when Jesus comes, he's just going to judge everybody immediately. Everyone's going to either go to heaven or hell, and that's it. And just to be oversimplifying. And that's based on things like Matthew 25 and stuff like that. But I have had other I've looked at that, and I think because the weight of evidence on the side of the millennial interpretation has been so much heavier for me, I don't let that. There's only 1 or 2 places where I really get that impression. And that's why, I do not try to just take the scriptures that support my point of view and use that to make me feel like I've got the right idea, because I know about the other scriptures. And what a lot of times I would definitely not want to do is to not tell you of the existence of those, and also of the interpretation. And if you're interested, you can go listen to my study on Matthew. I'm sure I talk about it quite extensively there, because, we're out of time. Anyway, so thanks for joining the study. We'll be back again tomorrow. Until then.
Is it not yet a very little while, and Lebanon shall be turned into a fruitful field, and the fruitful field shall be esteemed as a forest? And in that day shall the deaf hear the words of the book, and the eyes of the blind shall see out of obscurity and out of darkness. The meek also shall increase their joy in the Lord, and the poor among men shall rejoice in the Holy One of Israel. For the awesome one is ceased, the boaster is consumed. All they watch in vain are cut off. They make a man sin for a word, and lay a snare for him that rebuketh in the gates, that turn aside the just.
The wicked one, in particular, and this is terrible.